start. Alright, let's get this show on the road. So, are you in the stream? No.
Probably not.
That's fine. The stream just makes, explaining some of the stuff a little bit easier.
My computer barely runs Eve and
I,
Discord at the same
yeah.
time.
No, I get you. I get you. This will be recorded, so just letting you know that now. That I already started the recording, so. Um, so pretty much just gonna be like a short little, what are interdictors and hicks. Uh, the other part of the talk I scrapped. I'm gonna do that, separate because it just makes life a little bit easier. Um, so do you have any questions about interdictors or uh, heavy interdiction cruisers?
Not off the top of my head. I guess the big question I have is when to bubble, when not to bubble. Do you instinctively just know? Do you have to learn? Do you have to get all your fleet killed a couple times? How does that come about?
All right. So when to bubble, when not to bubble. Generally speaking, uh, you will bubble once you land on grid. Now, generally, the way we do it is, we land on grid. Well, everybody splashes the wormhole. Dictors will take off first to the initial point tackle. Could be a Helios, could be anything. They'll warp to that, shit their bubbles. But the rest of the fleet will be in warp as they shit their bubbles. So the thing with it is if you're in warp to the point before the bubble is launched, you will land at the destination. If you warp after the bubble's launched, you'll land at the edge of the bubble. So a lot of the times, the only time you quote unquote bubble your fleet is when, you know, somebody isn't paying attention. Generally, you rarely bubble your own fleet unintentionally. No, there's kind of two ways of doing the bubbles. You can do a defensive bubble, which is to prevent enemy fleet from getting to you, which is a lot of times what we do is, land on the target, shoot our bubble, and anybody that lands on top of us is going to land on those bubbles. Now, depending on the type of dictor you're using, can greatly change whether it's a defensive bubble or you need to, zip around shooting more bubbles. But pretty much most of the time, you don't, in wormholes, don't have to worry about, bubbling your own fleet. Because, everybody generally has a cloak. So, hopefully that answers most of your question.
Yeah, it helps.
Alright, we will go. So, there are two of the fits uh, that generally, well, I use personally. Um, you have, the Iris, which nobody pretty much uses because they still think it's a piece of junk, and a flycatcher.
The Eris will be the one that when I skill into it, that'll be the one I fly.
Mm. Now, generally speaking, this one's fit for just zipping around shooting bubbles. You zip past the target, get a few shots on them, and I use it as a defensive bubbler. So like I'll shoot a bubble once I land, zip around the targets, take a few pot shots, throw a bubble, like let's say there's an Astra house that they might bring people from. I'll line to that, shoot a bubble as I'm close to the edge of the other bubble. So it makes, an extra 10, 15 kilometers that they would have to burn in to, get to us. That's a defensive style bubble. The flycatcher, it's a bit slower, but you have dual prop and, you can do a lot more crazy stuff with it. This one's more for, zipping around, just shoot a bubble, blap at the target a few times. You might get a kill, you might not. Whatever. It's not there to, raffle stomp. It's there to provide bubbles for the fleet.
Yeah, I saved your Eris fit. It looks good. It's all, I mean, besides the 12 days final skill training, I can fly that.
Oh yeah, mine. I have pretty much all the skills. Like I went through and every ship that I make, I kind of fill out the skill queue and just be like, I won't fly it until level 4 this or level 4 that, and, stuff like that. Only because you know, I have flown the half fit before. Let's get that off the screen. So, Dictors, they're fast, they're agile, they're great for dumpstering fleets because we've caught in what mini orcas and other things like that. Also, these now have cloaks, Tech 1 cloak, but it's still enough that if you are expecting, like a hauler or something, you can just, immediately crap a bubble as soon as you decloak and, catch people. Like, lock time is not an issue. So it allows that.
Okay, I got another question, and it kind of applies to other ships as well. Let's say you're waiting for something to show up. You it gets there, you decloak, you bubble, and it cloaks, and you're trying to race to it to decloak it. How do you get from where you are to where he is um, to decloak him the best?
Okay, so generally, like, let's say I'm, on a wormhole, and I'd want to do it that way that, you decloak, you shoot your bubble. A lot of times, if you double click in space directly towards them, a lot of times people will click approach. I'll double click slightly in front of them and, fire off the micro warp drive. A lot of times I'll catch people because they'll still have forward momentum as they cloak.
Right, because if you hit approach on
Yeah, go ahead.
um, as soon as he cloaks, you
You stop.
just like slow down and stop.
Yep. But if you double click out in front of him, he cloaks, you're still zipping at full speed. And
Okay,
a lot of times
so
you'll catch him.
you just have to be paying attention to where he's at and pick
Hmm.
the spot.
Yep. I've caught in a couple of herons and other, stuff like that because you're just, you get going and you're going at what 2,000, almost 3,000 meters a second in this. So let's say he's 5, 6 kilometers off you, 2, 3 seconds you're gonna be there, and he's gonna decloak, and then by then your lock delay time is gone, and you can just start locking him. And as soon as he's locked, he's fucked, because now now you can tell everybody else, warp to me and bring in the whole fleet. But So yeah, there's four different dictors. Everybody and their brother's mother uses the saber. It's like the bread and butter of the dictors. But sabers do have a quote unquote Achilles heel. Generally, their pilots tend to be overconfident, and then you get stuff like that happens where you kill them, like just straight up murder them with an Astero. That was a battle at the hole, and he lost. It's one of the few times I've actually won against the Dictor with a smaller ship, but yeah, they can die to frigates, so it is possible. It was a quite a battle, but it was possible. Now, so a lot of times you'll be dictoring multiple ships, so there are a few things you want to watch for. Um, so let's say you're dictoring, a group of 3, 4 battleships, and you're going to bring in everybody behind you. You're going to want to look at their Z kills and see if they have heavy stasis grapplers. These things, if you get close to them, bring you to almost a dead stop. So they are something to be worried about when flying dictors, because generally speaking, if you get caught by it, you're pretty much done. Like it's they're going to apply battleship DPS to you, and you're not going to live very long. Now, if you got the bubble off and you got a big enough fleet, it might not matter, but it's still worth noting if you see these grapplers uh, trying to keep at least 5 to 10K off, are in that range. Hello. Uh, do Solano? Do you have any questions? Yeah, Brawly battleships, you'll want to stay out of range of them. But at the same time, they're going to take a month to lock you, so you do have time to, if you see yellow boxes. So it's all relative. Like you still have to fly it like it's a frigate, but you know being able to shoot that bubble pretty much means that if done correctly, you can stop a fleet, hold a fleet, and whatnot like that. Also, I believe no, I don't have Webbles in there. I know I have Webbles in this fit though. Yeah, Webbles. Uh, Stasis probes work just like a web, but your speedier targets. If you have more than one Dictor, have one guy throw these uh, Webbles at them. So like nightmares and stuff like that, you can zip up on them and drop one of these. You bring them down by what 60% or something. Uh, oh no, 30%. But they don't have a stack penalty with a web, so they're actually really useful in that regard. Other than their use in the fleet, any other questions?
Are people actually using those stasis web uh, probes?
They do get used uh, obviously a dictor's primary purpose is to, shoot the bubble. But if you have more than one dictor and, your dictor flies defensively and the targets are actually moving, a lot of times we don't end up with targets that are, moving around too much. Battleships, they ain't going anywhere quick. But let's say you catch, a Loki or something. You bubble him and he's zipping around and he's going to get out. Now, if you have a second dictor, you shoot, the web bubbles at him and stuff like that, and it will bring him down. It will slow him down. Um, you can use the web bubbles on a hole in instances where, let's say you're trying to catch a roller. If you shoot him with one of those things, it's going to slow him down quite a bit. And I think the bubbles are like 30 seconds of, yeah, AoE effect is about 30 seconds. And it's a 10-kilometer range.
Yeah, I can see that coming in handy where you have somebody tackled, but you're afraid he's going to splash out. You could
Hmm.
that might almost be better than the regular probe.
Yeah. Um, that's more of a one-off instance, but yes, it would be prime for that. They take a full minute to reload, so it's always a question of who has what loaded at what time to, kind of get an idea. Also,
Yeah, that was my next question is how many probes are in your launcher and how long is the reload time?
so the reload time is about a minute. Let's see, attributes. Well, link this for you so you can see. Um, reload time's a minute. The the amount of them you can have is three. Three normal interdiction ones, and I believe it's the same for the web ones. Um, yeah, that's right. Three and three. So, the normal, I think you can fire the web ones slightly faster. Um, the cycle time slightly faster, but I mean, they're web bubbles, so. Also, the area of effect for the web bubbles is 10 kilometers, and I think the normal interdiction spheres are about. That's not what I want. I want to know what the bubble is. Show info. The normal one is 20 kilometers. So it creates a 20-kilometer bubble. Now, they can be used defensively, offensively. There's a lot of ways of using these that, you know, allow you to do some pretty insane stuff. They last for about 2 minutes. So, like if you shoot one out and it's going to be out there for about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I've been saved by Dictor Pilot's defensive bubbles a number of times and was really impressed.
Oh yeah, three or four good dictor pilots can dictate an entire field. Like you can stop this part of the fleet from getting to you. You can stop Logi from warping off, or ships from warping off and getting Logi or things like that. You can just kind of dictate with help from an FC. You can really dictate a fleet and how it moves around with just some cheap dictators. But I think that covers most of the dictator part of it. Like, unless there's any more questions, uh, we'll move on.
when you mentioned that web spheres, you mentioned that they are not sticking, so it's basically just drop the speed for 30% and then again the web applies with the full strength.
Yes. So because it's an area of effect, the the web will still apply because the web is taken on as a different target, or taken on as a different calculation. So they'll already be AoE'd like a command burst. So they'll already drop 30% in their speed. Now, if you hit them with a web, you're not going to bring them down to zero, but you've already reduced 30% of their speed. Then you reduce it by the full 60. So 30% off the top. Then whatever's left is their quote unquote top speed at that time. You hit them with the web, it's another 60. So if they're traveling at 100 meters a second, you hit them with the bubble, they're now down to 70, and you take 60% of 70, they're now traveling at like 20, 25 meters a second.
Nice, that's sweet.
Yeah, it's really useful in that regard that you can, you know, like the flycatcher there has a web on it. You can shoot your web bubble, web the target, and now it's just going super slow. But it's pretty useful in that regard. There are, obviously instances where you just want to, decloak, shoot the bubble, shoot your interdiction sphere, and just grab a hauler or something because he's already going to be slow, and some targets it's just easier that way. But if you have more dictors on the field, I mean, if you have a pack of dictors floating around, everybody can have different loadouts and do different things in the fleet. I have all types of effects on the fleet on an enemy fleet, and it can create problems for people and infuriate other FCs quite quite substantially. Um, I know Evie in Corp. He flies Dictors as well. I've flown with him. I fly with using defensive bubbles to stop people, and he'll sit closer to the targets and keep the primary bubbles up. So with two pilots that are using exact opposite tactics of how to fly a Dictor, you can pretty much stop a fleet, hold the fleet you're already grabbing, and effectively just destroy the fleet you're grabbing, hold off the other fleet, and possibly even engage a response fleet, and still have the ability to literally have people grab loot and leave. Well, somebody like me would just be shooting bubbles around to keep uh, Trekovix or whatever decides to land on us at bay. Like I may lose my Dictor, but a lot of times, they still end up losing an entire fleet, and the response fleet sits there with their thumb up their ass. But we'll move on to the next part, the Hicks. So any any questions about Hicks before I just crack right into it? All right. So most of us have more or less seen Hicks being used as sitting on holes, you know, being a pain in the ass. There's four of them. My personal preference is the Onyx. I've seen people use broadswords. I've seen people use what is the Amarian one? I forget exactly. Let's double check. The Devoter. The Devoter, broadsword, and the Phobos. I don't see many people using Phoboses, but I'm not gonna say that they're not good. They just might be a little tight on the fitting space. Um, so I linked the loss of my Onyx. Now I lost it because of a variety of issues, but the Onyx that I have here is actually pretty good. I've used it multiple times. I'd use it to catch haulers because you pretty much just decloak, launch your bubble, and it's similar to the Interdictor, except I have a lot more tank. I can grab a target, hold it down, and if I have enough DPS, kill it by myself. Now this one's using rapid lights. You could use other missiles and other systems, but so you'll see these generally all over the place. Like people love their Hicks because the flying bubble. Everybody and their brother's mother will whole camp with these things. Now, it wasn't until I tried booshing one off a while back ago from like perimeter that I figured out that there is one other dirty little trick with these. So, people will use this. Now, the zero mass entangler is the thing that they made specially for rolling holes. Now, normally I would have no reason to fit this to a interdiction, a hick. The zero mass entangler is used specifically for rolling holes. So the old way used to be if you launched your bubble, you would lower your mass and you could get through a frigate hole. And as you'd go through the frigate hole, it would deactivate the module and cause you to put, multitudes of tons on a wormhole and just, wreck the wormhole. Help close it. Or if there was a hole that was, very close to dying, but you didn't want to risk, sending a cruiser through, you'd send a hick because it'd have the mass lighter than a frigate. Then, back through as normal size and close holes. But when you put the zero mass entangler on, it has a function of scramming you. Normally this would be, a detriment. And most people would have, be like, oh, well, self-scram. I don't want to deal with that. But when you're camping a hole, you don't have to have a what am I going to say? Oh, this. So you can have your normal bubble up, but if you have one of these zero mass entanglers on at the same time, you can't activate, the micro warp drive or things like that because it implies a self scram. The thing is you can't get booshed off of a wormhole with it because you're being scrammed by yourself. So somebody come along with something like a Magus or something like that they can't boosh you off the hole. In other words, they're just going to fire their boosh off and 100 kilometers off into no man's land. You're still sitting on the hole. They're now sitting there scratching their head, being like, "Well, fuck, what do I do now?" Any questions with Hicks for other purposes? All right. Um, but generally Hicks, we don't really use them a lot, mostly because, as you can see, just generally the price tag on this, just this fit alone, and this is a fairly cheap fit, is well into half a billion. And that, you know, that can be the deciding factor of whether you want to use it or not. Me personally, I don't have a problem putting, that much ISK on the field, so it's not usually a huge issue. But if you use, if you want to be lighter on the ISK, Hicks just generally don't don't work for that. It's a Tech 2 thing. But the dictors are far more usable for what we specifically do. As Hicks, if we're hole camping, holding down a hole, making holes, doing hole control itself, um, Hicks will be far more useful. As dictors are great for hit and run, like you just get in there, shoot your bubble, catch the fleet. Hicks are more for, we have the fleet already there. They know the fleet's there. Now we're just making it that they can't leave. It allows you to dictate where your fights are going to be. So now I know there's actual other dictors. Some of them are Hicks that are really good at certain things. The Galante ones like a Thorax. It's gonna be a lot of upfront DPS. The broadsword. I've seen people literally sit there on holes and similar to the Artie Loki and just snipe people as soon as they come in. Um, the Devoters, a Devoter, like they're heavy tanked. The Onyx, obviously it's an Onyx, it's Keldari, so you can get a really strong, good shield tank on it, and kind of like if you want to do it in a Pulsar, that's one of the best places to do it because you just get an egregious amount of tank, and you can just sit there and face tank a fleet while your reinforcements or whatever you're killing dies, kind of thing. Delco, I believe you were trying to speak up. Or DiCello, that's it.
Yeah, I know about those Hicks because we flown. Or I did not because I don't have the skills for it, but we flown them in Nephi. They were used to when we were camping our home hole.
Oh yeah, the Hicks far more set up to be a defensive bubble. Like dictors are obviously dictors. I've seen them used in nullsec. I've seen them used in wormholes. The dictor's more flexible. The Hicks, you are going to be slow. You are going to put a lot more ISK on the field. But if you're going to try to hold a hole or hold control over a hole, they're going to be your go-to. Like, and also you can use them for rolling holes, though they are what they are. Any other questions regarding Dicks, Hicks, or their uses? All right, I'm gonna fire off a question into Corp Chat and see if anybody has a question. Just because I'm recording this. You just because there's only you two in here, so it's unfortunately I can't help him with that, nor do I know any way to help him. Now he's gonna feel like an ass. Well, could you explain 0-point mass entanglers? We covered that. Um, two types. Oh, the bubbles. Actually, that's actually a good question. So on my Onyx, you can see I'm using a meta bubble. Now, that's only for fitting reasons that I'm using that, but there are larger bubbles. The Tech 2s, the True Sanchas, like you'd have to double check each one for its size comparably. Let's see. Warp disruption range. So the Tech 1 only does like 16 kilometers, but the metas will do 18. Tech 2s will do 20, and the fancier ones do a little bit bigger. Also, they have scripts for, like focus scrambling script, which, which pretty much just shuts down. Like if you get somebody and you actually have a script for use of the script, you can catch a Titan with it. Like you just point. You have to lock the Titan, hit it with the script, and it will shut off all the ABs, micro warp drives, and it is a warp scrambling. I forget exactly how many points of warp scrambling it does, but it's called an infinity point for a reason. But the warp disruptor one, I forget exactly what that one does, but does the same thing, just in a. I think it does it a little bit. It does it further, doesn't it? It does the same thing, but I gotta double check. Show info. So the warp scrambling one is shorter range. The warp disrupting one's longer range. They both do the same thing. So, but that one's just making your bubble bigger or smaller. I go with the meta one because they're dirt cheap. And to be honest, if anything's beyond 20 kilometers, I'm going to have to, judge what I'm doing. Because if a ship gets outside of that, it takes a full, cycle for the disruptor, the bubble to drop, which is about a minute. Activation time, 30 seconds. Okay. It's about half a minute. So that is also one of the reasons that using Hicks can be a problem, is the cycles. You can't just collapse the bubble whenever you want. So that's usually when people would get trapped in, their own bubbles and die because of it, mostly as a result of them not being, aware of what's fully going on. Um, um, I think other than talking about the bubbles, I think I pretty much covered everything. Um, I will be doing another talk with, more the tactics of how to, the using our normal cloaky ships to tackle the Asteros, Stratios, how to bump things off of cans and, how to get that sneaky tackle stuff. But that'll be at a later date. You're more than welcome to come. And, if you have any questions regarding that, I'll take those in fleet uh, after I'm done recording. So I'll wrap this up. Any more questions that you two have or concerns?
Not really. I was just about some clarifications which I didn't know before. So thanks.
All right, all right. Well, thank you for coming. Stop the recording.